Architecture is a manifestation of your values. I think architects are notorious for designing things that everybody sees as like, yeah, we should do this. And then it just gets cut up by the ravages of time. There's a certain degree of activism that's required and willpower on every project. Why is our architecture not as diverse as our culture is progressive? To succeed in this field, you have to be extraordinarily resilient. How are you wrestling with architecture in a purely digital future? Architects have to wake up. We are part of extremely powerful capitalist systems.
That is Alexander Josephson, award-winning architect and entrepreneur based in Toronto, Canada. Alex studied architecture at the University of Waterloo and in Rome. After deciding that change was needed in the world, he dropped out of the Architectural Association School in London to return to Canada and co-founded Partisans, a studio with a diverse team that challenges convention through the integration of design, technology, invention, programming, culture, and creative services. He is also the founder and CEO of Cumulus, a revolutionary digital memorialization platform born from personal struggle. My name is Peter Marcus Bach, and this is the Grand Challenges Podcast, a show about inspiring individuals who are stepping up to tackle the global challenges that our world is facing in their own unique ways. We reflect on the many out-of-the-box ways our guests have navigated the complexity and intricacies of our environment at the cutting edges of science, engineering, technology, and design. On today's show, Alex and I trace his architectural journey from rebellious and humble beginnings to several powerful projects that Partisans is working on. We highlight the urgent mindset shift that is needed in architecture, tackle topics such as daring to be different, spreadsheets in the sky, interfaith design, the disruptive force of AI, and demonstrate how beauty emerges when architects reject convention and design truly misbehaves. Visit tgcpodcast.show for detailed information and show notes on this episode. Thank you for joining us today, and please enjoy the show. Welcome to the show, Alex.
Thanks for having me, Peter. It was really nice to meet you and looking forward to a spirited discussion.
Oh, indeed. Spirited. And I mean, going through your journey, your profile, I don't even know where to start, but I think the most obvious one, like I like to do with many episodes, is locations. And you're based in Toronto. And I remember the last time I was in Toronto, which was in 2019, quite a while ago.
Okay. That's a nice time.
Yeah.
Pre-pandemic.
I remember cycling through the city a lot. And actually, I really enjoyed the city. Morning walks through the park to get my Tim Hortons, because every time I'm in Canada, I like to get the biggest possible Tim Hortons coffee.
Oh my God, I'm sorry that that was your cafe experience of Canada's Tim Hortons.
Nah, I'm very.
It's funny. Tim Hortons was at one point. It was like handmade. It was the commercials were about no pot was more than 20 minutes old. It was made from real beans. Well, it's made from beans, but like it was handmade sort of qualities. And when you asked for a Western omelet sandwich, they made it for you. I remember when I started university in 2001, you got a coffee and it was freshly ground, fresh pot. A Western omelet sandwich, fresh toast. Now it's owned by 3G out of Brazil, and it's like nothing tastes like real food anymore.
I guess the bigger you grow and the more intense the business.
Yeah. Well, private equity sucks the life out of qualities, right?
Yeah, that's true. And it's all about efficiency in the end. But hey, I still enjoyed it because it's just different. Being in Melbourne for 11 years, sometimes you need a change from the barista culture.
Did you have the food? Did you have a lot of good food while you were here?
Yeah, I think I went to a lot of different districts with fusion cuisine and just, good meaty dishes. So definitely enjoyed that. Was a while ago. Craft beer as well was really, really fun to experience as well.
And you had the real estate boom.
Yes, indeed. But that was actually what piqued my interest and why I brought up the whole conversation about me having been to Toronto, because I actually thought it was a fairly green city. One very interesting take on you and your story as well is that you actually used the term spreadsheets in the sky once.
Yes.
Being an architect,
yeah.
I really love this imagery. But tell me a bit about spreadsheets in the sky, because that was, in a way, a critique of Toronto and Toronto's urban development.
Yes. So I started a studio that's a critical studio, a research-based, ideas-based studio with really a cause. We have a doctrine. It's called Partisans. We believe in the political impact and social impact that architecture makes. And it's a manifestation of the values of a society, right?
Mm-hmm.
So spreadsheets in the sky. So Canada became a haven post-September 11th for foreign investment, which is great. It went into condominiums. Canada stopped building purpose-built rental in the 80s when there was a moratorium on tower building because we were building these awful towers. And so condominium investment that was really pioneered in Hong Kong by Li Ka-shing and Concord 8X, they brought that to Vancouver. And so there's a lineage, and it comes from China. And so you saw huge amounts of money pouring into Canada. And we wrote a book called Rise and Sprawl, the condominiumization of Canada in Toronto. Yeah. And, really it's funny. Anthony Bourdain came through Toronto for Parts Unknown at one point, and there's a scene of him driving from the airport on our elevated highway called the Gardner, and he goes, I think basically he said, "Oh my God, my eyes hurt. What on earth did this city do to itself?" And it's because he's driving through this monotony of extruded rectangular volumes with sort of greenish window wall systems, these sort of, mid-market to low-market quality glass facade systems that are really just extrusions. And they're balconies, which, turns these things into concrete radiators either in the summer or winter because we have such extreme seasons here. And they, to me, struck me as, well, they're the manifestation of Excel in 4 dimensions.
Hence spreadsheets.
Because Excel's colors are also green.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so it's this rigid manifestation of the aesthetics of an Excel spreadsheet into a building. Even the green hue of the cheaper glass, because as glass gets cheaper, it gets greener.
That's true.
As you go through the quality profiles and performance profiles of glass, it's interesting as an architect to know this, it gets bluer and then whiter, i.e. clearer. And so a lot of these buildings employ very low quality envelopes. And so you have these spreadsheets in the sky, hundreds of billions of dollars flowed into Canada to build out this infrastructure. And it was really a combination of some end users, but most of it was essentially replacing what was normally purpose-built rentals. But the government stopped making those really financially all that viable. Rents had to increase substantially. There were no incentives to build that kind of public, i.e. social housing. But really most countries have infrastructural incentives to build purpose-built rental. And so what we had were spreadsheets in the sky, and they looked like them, they felt like them, and they behaved like them too. And it all came crashing down about 3 years ago.
Oh boy.
When interest rates, the pandemic and the inflationary effects of that kind of quantitative interventions that occurred, essentially the music stopped, along with 100 other things that are very, very parochial and local. But essentially Canada banned foreign investment in housing, which along with interest rates and there is zero happening in the condominium market anymore.
Being someone who's grown up in condominiums all my life, growing up in Singapore, I'm kind of familiar with it. If done well, they can provide potential for community. But if, replication and meeting the demand is the main thing, then you end up with lots and lots of towers, most of them empty. And we certainly had this problem in Melbourne, Australia, when I was there as well. So yeah, definitely a challenge when you have too much of a good thing or a good idea, with good intentions, and then it just spirals out of control.
Well, they're bereft of any kind of architectural qualities, right?
The spreadsheets.
The companies who sell and marketed them, they spin stories about their qualities, but in the end, they're mundane, meaningless buildings. And they're not going to last either because they weren't built for a pro forma length of more than 4 years, so that the end user, the owner, didn't realize that they were buying essentially a car. Cars don't last that long.
And they lose their value pretty quickly. Yeah.
And they lose their value. So a lot of these facades are going to have to be replaced in 20 years.
Yeah,
15 to 20 years.
Yeah.
And that's massive, massive. Anyway, it's hundreds of billions, if not, maybe it was $1 trillion. I don't know. The boom lasted 25 years.
Incredible. Yeah.
It is a really long time.
That is a very long
it's a massive cycle. But now it's it's a precipitous crash. Precipitous. This is the largest correction in real estate history in Canada.
Oh,
and it's not probably over yet. I don't know if it's a global topic, but we're in the middle of it.
Okay. I mean, I've only heard of that being the real talk in Melbourne, Australia, but I'm sure in other places you'll see the same thing. And it was the same with China when they had a huge real estate boom. You see a lot of high rises, very monotonous as you described them, just standing empty or not even finished. So yeah, but I guess in a way that defines also the stance you take on where architecture is and how architecture should be done going forward. And that is sort of the world I'd like to explore in greater detail. And you being known as the rebel architect, I've certainly seen that written somewhere, which I think is very interesting. So I guess if I had to begin somewhere, one particular project you did, not as part of Partisans, and we'll get to the story of that shortly, but actually as part of your master's thesis, caught my attention. And that was that you tried to redesign Mecca.
I did, yeah.
Tell me about that. Because you're not Muslim, are you?
No, I'm Jewish.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah, I'm Jewish. So my first year of studio at architecture school started on September 11th, 2001.
Oh, wow. What a day to start.
Yeah, what a way to start, right? And I also attended an architecture school called Waterloo that was very interested in iconography and the cultural context and historical context that architecture is built in. And I just wanted to understand, by the time it got to doing a thesis, I wanted to understand this incredibly rich history of architecture as a result of social and cultural context between the Abrahamic religions. Because what I discovered was, just in some basic research and curiosity, was that we're one family. And this is sort of local, parochial, but the legislature, the parliament buildings in Toronto, every year they put up a Christmas tree and a menorah.
Oh.
So Judaism and Christianity were recognized, but there wasn't anything necessarily to represent Islam, right?
Yeah.
And I was interested in a kind of objective view of how they were connected and the stories that connect them, but also the architectures that connect them. And what I thought was just so beautiful, and where the redesign of Mecca comes in, was that if you really read the history, when the Prophet Muhammad was going to be run out of Mecca by, it was a pagan village, and it was a shrine, a pagan shrine. The Kaaba at the center of Mecca was a pagan shrine. And Muhammad was run out of Mecca, and he was harbored in a town called Yathrib, which was a Jewish town.
Ah.
And that town, Yathrib, became Medina.
Interesting.
Yes, it became Medina, which is a very important holy site. And then when Islam when Muhammad had enough of a following, they obviously went back to Mecca, and the pagan shrine, the Kaaba at the center, where pagan idols were stored. You could argue that the founding act of Islam was the destruction of the idols.
Ah.
They went in and they destroyed the idols. And what's so fascinating about Islam is God is the light upon light. And there's a kind of abstraction to this idea of God, and it's very powerful. The problem is all the other language. Obviously the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Quran, there's language in there that is extraordinarily divisive in all of these texts. And these are thousands of years old, these texts. 1,500 to 1,000 to thousands of years old. And so people's behaviors and cultures were very different then. And also, the problem today is there isn't the ability to edit these anymore. They're done.
Yeah.
Whereas if you look back in the histories, these books evolved. But now it's interesting. Francis Fukuyama said there's the death of history. Well, it's like these things that were, evolving over time no longer evolve. Things have kind of solidified and calcified. But my point was, at Queen's Park, I built a temporary mosque.
Mm-hmm. Interesting, yeah.
And in Mecca, to represent this idea of the world when you pray in Islam is to focus at, it's called Qibla, to focus at the Kaaba. I found this spatial quality so fascinating. And I said, well, like the straightest line, the shortest line to Kaaba is not the way a bird flies. It's looking through the earth.
Ah, true.
If you're in Canada, you're looking through the earth to Mecca. You're not just looking east, you're looking into the planet. Indeed. And this idea, this spatial quality of that, the space that you create when you're praying, in all of these religions really fascinated me. And so I proposed replacing the Kaaba with a kind of singularity, a void, to better represent this kind of abstraction. And it was at once a provocation, but at the same time, I thought a very high fidelity approach to the founding act of Islam, which was the devoiding of the Kaaba, to create a void. The niche in your prayer mat or your mosque is supposed to be black to represent the infinity. the unknown,
the ineffable.
Yes, or the inevitable. And I was like, well, what better representation of that than a void, a singularity?
I came across that void, and I think that was really for me the centerpiece, because it got me thinking, about, when you think you're praying to God and what that represents in a physical manifestation, well, we don't understand that well. So yeah, I mean, also just such an interesting take, because you've really talked about different faiths in explaining this journey towards your design ultimately. And interfaith is something that I believe is very close to your heart, because ultimately you've had some exposure through your work, through your own personal experiences to a lot of this.
It's really important to me. And I think that interfaith right now is the way to peace. And so my thesis was about peace. It was about actually recognizing the connections between those Abrahamic religions, but also the true histories, and seeing it through also Jewish, Muslim scholars on the Christian side as well, and trying to analyze historical truths. You see connections versus differences. And I think that that's extremely powerful, but because it takes thought and it sort of cuts away at the kind of assumptions, the superficial assumptions that people are taught about these religions, it's unfortunately not how things are interpreted. And so I find architecture and design as a very interesting lens through which you can bring people together and solve for these things, but it's easier said than done.
No, indeed. I mean, you see examples. I mean, when I read about it, personal experience, I visited the Hagia Sophia many years back. And it's one of those examples where religions can coexist, formerly a church, then a mosque. But when you go in, and I think it was still a museum at the time, and now they've converted it back to a mosque, I believe. But when you go in, you really see, the decor and the artworks of both religions very peacefully inside the building, the airiness of it. Just the feeling of, happiness in that building was so mesmerizing for me that I was like thinking to myself, why don't we have more interfaith kind of structures, abilities to bring the people together?
And why not? It would be interesting, it would be very fascinating to do in the Hagia Sophia. There's a very significant Jewish population in Turkey as well. People don't talk about it. It's a serious population. And that was a church. It was a Byzantine church.
Yeah.
So what would be fascinating is, on Friday, it's a mosque. On Saturday, it's a synagogue. On Sunday, it's a church. I mean, I would love to see, would that not be the most poetic proof of the versatility of the Abrahamic tradition in an important venue that's already been two different spaces of worship and sanctuary? But, these things are very controversial, these ideas, but they're not at their core. And that's the problem.
I mean, it's true. It's a matter of perception, because
it's just perception.
It's doable.
And the perception just isn't aligned with reality.
Yeah.
It's an illusion.
But I think it's always healthy to challenge these kinds of perceptions, which is really what characterizes the work that you do. And this was really the starting point of it. And you mentioned University of Waterloo. After that, you actually went to Rome. But I guess getting into architecture in the first place, when I was reading a bit about your journey, you apparently were drawn to the field because you didn't know any architects.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of a dumb reason to go into something because you thought it was rebellious. It was really where I grew up. Canada's very conservative. I grew up in a very conservative part of Canada, or at least milieu, and there were no family friends that were architects. None of my family were architects. They were entrepreneurs and doctors and scientists, and it was like saying it was rebellious and it was romantic. And instead of drugs and alcohol, I was an artist. I wanted to be an architect. And that actually saved me in a way because I didn't have the same kind of physical rebellion that a lot of teenagers have, especially boys. My rebellion was picking what I wanted to pursue in life because nobody's, obviously my parents supported me, but I think they would have preferred easier paths. At the time, because they knew how difficult a profession it was. I think that architecture, since really the 80s, since the advent of technology and certain labor cases were lost around, protecting architects' fees and stuff like this in the 80s in the United States and Canada. And so ever since the late 80s, architecture has eroded in people's minds. So in the 90s, when I decided I wanted to be an architect, my parents were just like, oh, you're like saying you want to be an actor.
No. It was the unfortunate timing, when a particular profession gets a bad rap.
It's not about a bad rap. I think things happened. The AIA, the American Institute of Architects, and the Canadian equivalent lost cases brought by the construction industry whereby they said that the regulatory bodies like the American Institute of Architects weren't allowed to enforce fee bans or minimum fees for project types and sizes. And essentially architects lost, it became a free-for-all. So you could bottom of the barrel of the cost. So that's like saying a cardiologist, would you feel comfortable paying $100 for heart surgery? I wouldn't. But many people are perfectly comfortable paying an architect the equivalent to design their home or their tower, as long as they're saving money. So it's a conflict. And architects lost those battles. I was a kid at the time, so I was unbeknownst to me, but I think my parents were a bit, and they knew, and so architecture was rebellious.
But parents are always caring, but at the same time supportive, I guess, in your case too.
What about your parents? What did they say about you?
I mean, it's also the running joke I always make on the show, and it's been a while since we've had an architect on the show, so I'm glad to revisit this as well and to rekindle my passion for it. So if I could draw better, I probably would have become an architect and pursued architecture, but I can't draw to save my life. And then we had the stereotypical, my dad was like, you're good at math, so you should do something that's good with math. So become an engineer. So I went the engineering path.
Yeah, I mean, there's perceptions that architects have to be these great artists, but it's interesting, over the last 25 years, the most sort of famous architects weren't necessarily great drawers. Like, there were, obviously some of them were fantastic draftspeople, Norman Foster being one of them, Zaha Hadid being another. Obviously, I think the best know how to draw, but there are many intellectual-based architects that there's no marketing around their drawn work. I can speak to a number of different, very, very successful, meteorically successful architecture firms where their principals are more intellectuals and really like conductors versus what you would call the classic artist. And I think it's a misperception. But I think as an engineer now, you can engage in your passion for architecture through crafting the world around you.
No, that's very true. And over time, when I started to learn a lot more how diverse and how deep the field goes in architecture, as also working with some fellow architects, some of which have been on the show as well, I started to really understand that it's more than just drawing, but that you often also are given, at least in Switzerland, this is the case, the first shot at trying to redesign how the urban environment looks. And often you have the ability to guide it with, of course, under certain constraints, but that certainly rests in your hands, whereas the engineers then have to come in and try and make sense of it in a structural way, ultimately. Although I think it's becoming more collaborative nowadays.
It's much more collaborative. Yeah. On the things that are ambitious, it's very collaborative. Engineering isn't a post hoc, especially structural and mechanical. Like they're not, like on the most ambitious projects, you can't look at those secondary. You have to look at them in conversation with the vision that you're putting forward. So yeah, I think today, there's the perception that the architect just has the most fun.
That is true. I mean, I attended some critiques at ETH Zurich for some of the architecture courses as sort of the outsider bringing a fresh perspective. But when I see what the students had to do and the breadth of the research and the incredible lengths they went to really understand different topics, whether it's ecology or whether it's agriculture, or silvipasture, I was like, wow, you can really have fun trying to gather this knowledge, understand it, find the interconnections. Makes me think, I should not have let the drawing stop me in the end.
No, but you're so empowered to, like, if you're like, you're an engineer, you're a successful guy. Like,
no, thank you.
You have the power to craft the world around you. You can hire an architect. You can be part of those discussions. By the way, ETH is probably one of the top 5 most rigorous institutions, if not top 3 most rigorous institutions around the world in architecture. So the fact that you got a glimpse of really like the equivalent of pit lane for architecture at a Formula One level. Like, wow, that's what that was. If you're over at ETH, I guess they call it Etaha. That's the Kentucky Derby. That's F1.
Interesting.
So you're seeing the most rigorous, the most intelligent, also the most well endowed. Their resources are extraordinary. They've made a huge impact on how architecture is being practiced now.
Oh, definitely. And a lot more knowledge-driven, data-driven, and, definitely trying to bring in a lot of the sustainability principles, different philosophies that will create better worlds and not the monotony that we're starting to see a bit too much around the world. But back to you. I mean, we've sort of touched upon the surface of your journey, why you started architecture, that rebellious nature. You finished at University of Waterloo with the master's thesis. Then you got some exposure in Rome and also in London, the Architectural Association. So you went from Canada across to Europe, broadening your horizons, seeing a bit of a different perspective around this idea of architecture. I mean, what were some of the highlights there, and how did it change your perceptions?
Well, first, I should clarify that it was way more chaotic than that and non-linear. So I did everything I could to not be in Canada. I felt that when I started architecture school in Waterloo, although it was in the presence of some of the great computer scientists and mathematical geniuses in the world, you've got the Perimeter Institute around the corner, the invention of the BlackBerry and smart handheld devices there. It was a hive of incredible activity in 2001. Apple was on its knees in 2001. It was really the rebirth. It was the start of the Johnny Ive era, really, or at least it was taking hold. And so Waterloo was a hotbed. But at the same time, I recognized that architecture, you needed a really global perspective. And so I decided to do everything I could to do my education elsewhere. So I was in Los Angeles working on an internship in 2001. I left Canada to go to France in 2002 actually it was late 2001, to spend a year just studying architecture and language in France, Paris and southern France. And then ended up back at Waterloo, working at a prestigious firm in Toronto and not fitting in at all. Just like my aesthetic, my desire for formal experimentation, my entire kind of perspective on architecture wasn't congruent with a very corporate Canadian architecture firm. And a man there said, Alex, you have to leave Canada. You have to go to Italy, work for this guy. And I sent my portfolio to them and asked for a job. It was Massimiliano Fuksas's office in Rome. And they gave me a job. That was it. Like basically 2003, in the fall, I went to Italy and did my work term there. And I was supposed to come back. I didn't. I did my term in Rome with the University of Waterloo. And then I was supposed to go back again and found a way to continue doing courses in Rome. I only had to go back for one term, essentially one term between 2004 and 2009. And I did my entire master's in Rome as well. Yeah. And then after that, my partner and I, Elisa, we won the New York Prize Fellowship at the Van Allen Institute in Politics and Culture. I was very interested in the intersection between politics and culture and architecture. So I'm the only Canadian that won the Van Allen Institute Fellowship. And in 2009, we left for New York. And then the relationship with, just kind of fizzled. And then I was left with the question, well, do I stay in New York? Do I go back to Rome? I had started a studio in Rome. I was doing very provocative public installations in Rome and activist-based architectures. My thesis, for example, was mounted in Toronto, but designed in Rome. And the financial crisis was a huge, huge weight on everybody's minds. And at the same time, Canada was going through this just invincible building boom. And I thought, you know what? Maybe after 10 years as a wanderer and an academic mutt, maybe it's time to come back. And so I came back, and it was like rehab, right? It was like travel, it was like tourist rehab, right? Because I had been traveling and learning architecture all over the world and being given these incredible freedoms by the University of Waterloo School of Architecture to study elsewhere. Obviously coming back to do the courses that were required when I had to, but mostly being able to do it in Rome and other places. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I need one more degree. I got into Columbia GSAP. I got into the AA in London. And for those listening, AA is not Alcoholics Anonymous. It's the Architecture Association. It's one of the oldest, if not the oldest, schools of architecture in the world. This is where Zaha Hadid went to school. Anyway, I went for a few weeks, and I just was like, and I said, I'm a package deal. If I get in, you have to allow my business partner, my studio partner, Puya, get in too. And they let him in too. But I went alone. And after a few weeks, I was just like, you know what? I've done like 10 years of school, and I think I got to start my life. And I dropped out, which was crazy. My father was like, you're nuts.
No.
You just wasted a lot of money on an entire term at a prestigious university in England, and you're coming back home to Toronto. He was like, you really are a rebel. Like from his perspective.
Once a rebel, always a rebel.
And I said, but what do you mean? I want to start making things. I was 28, and I started Partisans when I was 29.
Wow.
And that was it.
I certainly know the feeling of, to finally finish studying and doing something with the knowledge that you've gained.
But it was super nonlinear. You see that, right?
I can definitely see that.
It was fast and furious and chaotic and romantic. It was all sorts of stuff.
But I guess experiences shape you, and sometimes big life changes will show you the path towards where you have to go next, and the experiences that you need to gather in order to then get back to, what you're really meant to do, the big vision that you have. Yeah, I mean, coming back to what I was thinking of, as you said, I did, my undergraduate, then I did my PhD, and it was also around 2014. How old was I? Probably around the same, when I finished. And I thought I probably should start doing something. And so, research was sort of the natural continuation. And many years later, after, a research career, I'm now running my own company. So it's, I guess, non-linear journeys, non-linear stories. But at some point you feel there's that element that you want to bring to the world. And for you, that was Partisans.
God, I wish I had known you a year ago so we could have hung out in Singapore and gone to the hawker markets and talked about what you're doing and see more of Singapore, because I had such a superficial romp through it. I was only there for 2 nights.
Oh, really?
I went there twice, once with both my co-founders of Partisans in 2015 when the Marina Bay Sands had basically just opened a couple years earlier. And we had a crazy time. I remember we had our haircuts at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m.
What?
We went, it was just, we had we were only there for 3 nights together, and we just stayed up. I don't know how we functioned, but we just stayed up all night partying and seeing Singapore. But it would have been great to see Singapore together through your eyes.
No, definitely. Fun fact about me, I left Singapore before Marina Bay Sands even existed. So I moved away with family. My parents moved to Malaysia. And the main reason is because I didn't do national service. And that is actually the main reason I can't go back to Singapore. So
there you go.
As much as I would definitely love to go back, and if you had been there and were allowed in, I would have definitely given you the tour. But yeah, a bit of a complication there. But hey, if you're ever in Switzerland, hit me up.
My former business partner, he had the same problem in Iran. I know a lot of Iranians who have the same problem. It's a conundrum, right? Because you become sort of like an exile.
It does. I mean, it gets complicated. I mean, I've got a German citizenship, so I think it works. Yeah, hence why Europe. Nice. I've made Europe my home now, getting back close to my roots as well.
Yeah.
And so Partisans, I guess when you read the journey, it felt like, like the apple of architecture, because apparently you founded it in a storage locker with your co-founder.
Oh gosh, yeah, those were the glory days.
Tell me about the glory old days.
Well, we had very radical ideas about how things should look and feel and be formally. Mm-hmm. That meant no straight lines, organic solutions to complex problems. We were very interested in technology at the time. Everything that was possible formally became unlimited, really, because of where software was going. And so we were making things and bringing them into the world ourselves because we could use the software, and we were also very handy. And in order to do our first projects, basically, when you're young, you're given opportunities, but usually it's because they're really, really cheap, or they see a way to work with you to achieve something that they wouldn't be able to with another professional. And that is exactly what happened. The first couple things were sort of like retail displays. We rented a storage locker because it was big enough that we could build these things ourselves. So we were not only the designers, but we were really fabricators too. And that eliminated, when you're talking about eliminating a general contractor or a builder, and you do it yourself, you eliminate 50% of the costs. I mean, there is a lot of cost built into the delivery, not just the hard elements. And so we used this storage locker to build these feature elements for our first few projects ourselves.
Wow.
So we'd work with fabricators to get the raw material hewn into whatever the shapes were that we needed for these display shelves or these sculptural elements. And then we would finish and assemble them ourselves. And then we'd bring them to the locations. And it was crazy. It was kind of nuts if you think about it. I think we got fired from our second job. It was sort of fired after we had finished. It was you're fired, but we finished.
That doesn't quite make sense, but okay.
Someone told me architects shouldn't work where they are from.
Okay. Interesting.
They should move and then move back after they've made lots of mistakes.
I guess the mistakes shape your unique approach then in the end, because once you make it, it's deliberate or you don't do it again.
Your failures become your features.
Actually, that's a good way of putting it. Storage locker to then you co-founded Puya Baktash's apartment as well. Apparently, there was a funny anecdote there where you had to, I guess, make the apartment makeshift. So, by night it was an apartment and by day it was an office.
Yeah, and it smelled terrible. We brought people who were extraordinarily powerful into this place. It was like a rundown building in a former industrial district in downtown Toronto. All these beautiful brick and beam buildings. It actually became notorious for call centers and pornography filming. And we had to sign a contract saying we weren't doing that. It was kind of weird. I was like, this is so strange. But it was super cheap space. It was a big loft. And we built a giant plywood box that was like a huge table, like 10 feet by 10 feet where 10 people could work around. But one side of it flipped up and we would push his bed underneath it every day. And behind his bed was a couch. So during the day, it was an office and it looked like an office. And during the night, after every day, we would pull his bed back out. I think I have a video of it somewhere.
Oh, wow.
And it was just like, I can't believe the people we brought there. They must have just been horrified. I can't believe they let us continue to work for them. But I guess we provided good value.
Indeed.
We provided good value. And I guess it was kind of fun.
But that rebellious nature is really the core of Partisans. I mean, your quote, which really caught my attention when we first met up, and that was really that beauty emerges when design misbehaves.
Yeah, that was misbehavior. That was for sure, or at least what do they call it? In the context of hiding the bed, it was sleight of hand.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. It shows skill and mastery over the space.
The funny thing is, to us, we thought we were spinning some kind of illusion, but I'm sure that every client and person that was brought in there knew exactly what was up. Like, they weren't stupid. Like, the two clients that really set the company moving forward were a very successful businessman in Toronto and his wife that commissioned a sauna by us. And so they really gave us our shot. And then Osmington, which is the Thompson family, well, David Thompson's family's real estate arm, they own Thomson Reuters, storied Canadian dynasty. And these two incredibly successful families hired us for projects. One was a civic project, the fit out of Union Station in Toronto. And can you imagine bringing these people's representatives into this, like beat up loft with a bed stored under the plywood? I mean, it must have been comical for them. I have to ping them and go to lunch or something and reminisce about it because it was, in retrospect, probably pretty funny.
I guess it's something to talk about when you reflect back many years after.
Yeah.
But these are the clients you remember because, they looked past the bed hiding under the table.
They really did.
Yeah.
They certainly smelled past it. Looked and smelled past it.
Oh, boy. Humble beginnings.
Yeah.
But really a powerhouse now. And the sauna you mentioned, does that happen to be the Grotto?
Yes.
Because I think you had another sauna project as well, or a wellness center project. That's why I was like sort of tossing between the two.
Not back then. Back then, that was our first project, standalone project. It wasn't the first thing we did together, but that was our first real client. And that really got us started. And then we had a lot of support from friends and acquaintances and colleagues that ended up turning into Union Station, which empowered us technologically. And then got a lot of media attention in the beginning.
No, incredible. And just reading up on the Grotto Sauna, I mean, particularly challenging about it was also the fact that you had to build it on a, I guess, fairly environmentally sensitive area, right? Because you had to manage the potential impact that construction of the sauna could have.
Yeah, so the sauna it's actually a cool, we got to put it online, but the sauna was brought to the site on a truck from a factory in Toronto and put on a barge. There were two barges that went to the island, one with the sauna on it, one with a crane on it. And the sauna was dropped onto the site, which was prepared delicately in advance. And no waste on site. All the panels, everything was brought prefabricated to the site. And it was no more than 2 weeks of on-site presence.
Wow.
It was very fast. Yeah, it was very fast. We don't tell that story well enough. But we're on to other things now. So
no, indeed. And I mean, since then, you've had quite a few high-profile ones. Two others that I definitely want to talk a bit about because one I could relate to in a parallel project I did, which is the Hearn. So, former power plant to I guess cultural district and residential housing. If I had to sum it up, I mean, I myself, my first foray into working with architects was actually on a project in the city of Bern. former gas processing works that supplied the gas for the city back in the day, then went sort of into industrial limbo, used as partly a cultural hub for the youth. And they wanted to do some redevelopment there as well. So in a way, I guess my first entry there was in this kind of context.
Is that the gas castle?
The gas castle, yeah.
The gas castle, yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
I didn't know about this project. And you worked on this?
I helped the architecture studio that it was a competition, so we joined up our expertise, and I helped to plan out, in terms of data and analyses, what are some of the important aspects to be aware of on the site. And we began with biodiversity modeling and really identifying the core ecological corridors. We didn't end up winning the competition, but we came in rank 5 because we proposed a pretty radical design where we tried to give a lot of the site back to nature, in a way aligning with the cohabitation philosophy. Listeners, if you're curious about this, we talk all about it on episode 2 with Scott Lloyd. But yeah, it was a fascinating way of combining data analysis and, on the architecture side, really investigating the history of the sites and taking that defensive stance. We're not going to let urban sprawl take over. We're going to work with what's already there, what's existing, and to then build it up from there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at this for the first time, but I'm going to include this as one of the precedents. Like, we have this incredible research database of projects that inform the Hearn, and they're all over the world. I'm going to add this because I didn't know about it. It's a pretty interesting project. It's cool.
I can send you more info. But I guess in your case, tell me a bit about the Hearn.
It's an unbelievable, unfathomable scale of building. And the fact that it's still here. Toronto is sort of notorious if you're a Torontonian. We've gutted our city of most of the heritage fabric, and we're left sort of saving quite insignificant buildings at this point. But somehow a couple of these huge industrial infrastructures have survived. One of them is called the Hearn. And it is a post-war, 1951 was the beginning, coal-fired power plant. And this building evolved until the late 70s and was shut down in the early 80s. But basically, it's about 1,200 feet long by 400 feet wide, and at some parts, it's 230 feet tall.
Wow.
The stack itself, there were many, many turbine halls and generator bays. So there were at one point, I believe, 8 stacks of different scales on the south side of the building. It's a brick, what I'd call sort of like functional deco. It's really an architecture of mechanical qualities, but it's enormous. And they replaced those stacks with it's almost an 800-foot tall stack. It is taller than most buildings in most cities.
Incredible.
Around the world.
Yeah.
And you can climb up to the top of it. So this enormous behemoth was stripped of all of its valuable metals and most, if not all, of the toxic substances that are sort of imbued in post-war architectures that are, power plant architectures. And it is now this lattice, this matrix of enormous steel structure. And It's void, it's empty. And we were, this is like, how do you get work? It's an interesting story.
Yeah.
Because I was always very interested in culture, again, culture and politics and the intersection of those in terms of architecture. So I was very aware of what was going on in the city, and I was invited to support something called the Luminato, which was a cultural festival that Toronto put on to bring the world back to Toronto after the SARS outbreak. So the original sort of COVID-like epidemic that happened in Canada in the early aughts, it really damaged tourism in Toronto. And it took a decade, if not longer, to recover. And the Luminato was set up as a festival to bring the world back to Toronto post-SARS. It's almost like post-COVID therapy, but COVID only happened in one city, Toronto. Imagine that.
Yeah.
This actually happened. And so Luminato hired Jorn Weisbrod, who is Rufus Wainwright, the singer's partner. And Jorn Weisbrod is sort of this genius cultural raconteur and curator who ran the Luminato and discovered the Hearn in his journey from Germany. And being as enlightened as he is and having worked for Robert Wilson in opera, he asked the people he met in Toronto when he started running the Luminato, what are good places to do things? And someone showed him, I don't know who, the Hearn. And I was then in the orbit of these people and somehow got invited to this dinner where they would invited 500 cultural patrons to pay and support the Luminato at a dinner. And they set up a table 300 feet long. It's unbelievable, this event. Unbelievable, really.
300 feet.
Wow. Yeah, it was. This building is 1,200 feet long of uninterrupted space. Uninterrupted. Like if you look at it, if you just look it up on your computer.
Yeah, I'm staring at the section of what you ended up designing for it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's massive.
Yeah. So, but there was a catch. The dinner cost, I think at the time it was $1,500 a seat. It was really expensive. It was like 2014. And I just said to my partner at the time, I was like, I think this is a very important thing. I think we have to support this. We have to find the money to do this. Beg, borrow, and steal. And, I found the money. My business partner went as a guest of mine. He was my date.
You're plus one.
And we went to this dinner. And because we invested in it, because we were passionate about being a part of this vision, we were then eventually asked if we would want to design it. And it was a temporary event. It was going to be 3 weeks long, and it was about activating. It was called Turn on the Hearn. Wow. And it was about bringing Luminato inside the Hearn, this cultural festival, building a 2,000-seat, 1,500-person Shakespearean theater in the round, installing the largest disco ball conceived by Michel de Bruyne, the artist, 45 feet in diameter. You can imagine that a 45-foot diameter disco ball in the turbine hall at the Hearn is twice the scale of the Tate.
Jeez.
That's how big it is.
No,
it's twice the size of, it's larger than twice the size of the Tate in London. It's bigger than Battersea. This is a massive building. It's just not as beautiful technically as those buildings. Those buildings have more craft to their facades. Ours is more utilitarian.
But hey, it's got historical character.
It's got character, right? Yeah. But that festival was like a game changer culturally. It was kind of a moment in Toronto's cultural history. And we made it happen. The city of Toronto somehow made it happen. And it was extraordinary. And subsequently been working on it ever since for the owners of the building. And the Hearn itself is on a 12-foot thick concrete reinforced slab. You can support a 50-story residential mixed-use tower on this without a foundation.
Jeez. Yeah.
That's how big it is. And it's like a perfect place to reinvigorate, re-intensify, bring streets inside of, turn it into a city and a building, basically. And that's what our vision is. And we're working towards that with the owners of the property. And we've made applications to the city to create a community like no other anywhere in the world.
And I mean, you've really packed in a whole range of different types of activities and uses, keeping the cultural heritage. But apparently, I think they also wanted 8,500, close to 8,500 new residential units in the area as well.
So it's 36 acres. So to get some context, the Hearn itself is about 240,000 square feet of space. So you're talking roughly 8 to 10 acres of interior space. And then the site itself that it rests on is about 30 acres. So, 30 acres can support a pretty vast population. And also to make a building like that financially viable, you need not only a vehicle to make money to pay for that rehabilitation, but also to populate it enough so that the businesses or infrastructures you're going to inset within the revived Hearn shed can prosper. And so you need a critical mass of population. And really this idea of the complete community is the basis of the vision. And I think conservatively, we're targeting between 8 and 12,000 units. So I think right now that's in a process of sort of negotiation. I'm just the designer of the Hearn component, the master plan and the density and the elements outside of the Hearn are really not my responsibility, but I'm part of the argument about why that shouldn't sit alone as a relic decaying further. We catalyze the site, needs to be rezoned and re-intentioned.
And revitalize it, but keep its historical significance, I guess, and its past alive as well. And
Toronto needs $1 billion reason. Toronto needs $1 billion engine for tourism. There's nothing, like the CN Tower is no longer the tallest building in the world. They need, our city needs an economic reason to fly from so far away to come here. I mean, that's the one problem about Canada. It's very inaccessible from a financial perspective for a lot of people. It's a long flight. It's like going to Australia.
Yeah,
you might go to Canada. You might go to Canada or Australia once in a lifetime. Whereas you're more inclined to fly to New York and invest your money to see those places. You might add Canada to your trip, but Toronto desperately needs to reassert itself as a place to visit and a leader, objectively.
Definitely. But I guess many reasons. I mean, from my own perspective, I feel like I'm overdue to go visit again.
I think we've built a lot and we're going to be building a lot worth coming back. But I think this is one of those things where, we really need to do this and the city's got to get out of the way and the province has got to help and the federal government needs to put some money in too. But Yeah, in the annals of architecture, it's probably the only place that can be true to the vision that Cedric Price had, legendary architect Cedric Price had for the Fun Palace, which was conceived as sort of like this fantastical theoretical architecture within the Battersea Power Plant hulk, and also just without a context. The Hearn can really be that in the context of architecture, but that's sort of nerding out. It's insignificant in the in the argument, but it's about the process.
Yeah, but ultimately an ongoing one that is evolving now, and I guess getting closer to realization.
I mean, we will see, like in Toronto, when it comes to entitlements and planning, it ain't over until the proverbial lady sings. So I'm hopeful. I hope the city recognizes its opportunity and can kind of relinquish some of the sort of controls that it puts as gatekeeping for projects and let this just proceed.
Well, I hope that definitely becomes an opportunity for the city to then, loosen those controls.
Yeah, they have to figure out temporary use permits. They have to figure out that this should be a part of a community. They have to figure out that, yes, this community is big enough to merit an extension of, above ground light rapid transit in front of it, streetcars, or bus stops. Like, it's basic logic, but there's politics involved. And instead of just seeing it for what it is, there's politics. And it's challenging because there's more to it.
No, indeed. So in a way, the Hearn defines, regenerative urbanism, how you can keep the cultural heritage of the history of the place. One other project that I thought was really fascinating and you recommended I look into was the Orbit Master Plan, which for me, it kind of relates to some, I guess, fantastical thoughts I'm having at the moment about what future cities really look like. It's based on a lot of established concepts, but done in a way that I think is sustainable in the future. Tell me a bit about Orbit.
Yeah, so Orbit is a vision for a new incantation of the Garden City, which is a very old idea. It was proposed by Ebenezer Howard, who was a theorist, a designer, a visionary who designed the Garden City. And it was an idea for a city based on industrial engine at the center of a community, or an economic engine at the center of a community, around which radial infrastructure was placed, and that radial quality of the city, so circular plan, was really about making it the most efficient place for a person to walk around versus the grid, which is not the grid or spaghetti plan of, say, a typical suburb. Those are not the most efficient ways for a person to walk through a city. And so the Orbit was a response to an RFP, a transit-oriented community north of Toronto that was to be a sort of relief valve for density, because Toronto was growing at such a high pace in 2016, 2017 when we won this. I think it was 2017 or 2018 when we started working on it. And Toronto has a green belt, a sort of like demilitarized zone, this thing called the Moraine, the green belt, and there's no residential community development allowed within that space. It's agricultural watershed land, and its preservation is meant to preserve the biodiversity and aquifer quality of Toronto. And it's very important, but what it's essentially done is limit the boundary of wherein Toronto can develop. So once you've hit the boundary of the green belt, you have to pass over it to get to where you can develop again, and it's tens of kilometers. It's not like a 2 kilometer stretch. It's like 50 kilometers, right? It's huge.
I mean, usually a green belt is meant to lock it. Yeah.
It's a lock. And so you have two options. You can hopscotch over the green belt, which is what Orbit is. Orbit is north of the green belt, just south of Barrie, which is a city north of Toronto, on a lake called Lake Simcoe, a massive lake by any proportions in any other country, but small in Canada. We have some very large bodies of water in Canada.
That you do.
Yeah. And then the other option is to go up, right? So we wrote Rise and Sprawl, the critique of condominiumization in Canada, which is a vertical reaction to spreadsheet design within the boundaries of the belt. And then we won this RFP to develop the Orbit. And the Orbit, what we did was we said, listen, this is some of the most agriculturally fertile land in North America. It's called the Holland Marsh. And Orbit basically rests on the fringe of that agricultural land, just west of Lake Simcoe and south of Barrie. So it's kind of in this gray zone where it is agricultural, but it's also experiencing development, but typical sort of sprawl, suburban sprawl, which is very bad for the environment. It's not sustainable.
Yep.
High energy to live in those environments, and also just not a very dense or appropriate way to solve for population and housing needs. So the orbit is essentially, on the one hand, a response to the grid, the colonial grid that the British put in place in southern Ontario, and at the same time, a transit-oriented community that could be radial in nature, but within a grid. And then also a response to the fact that the land is very fertile. And so every square inch of land that we develop in the orbit is lost agricultural product for a country that really needs to have food security. And so, well, how do you put 250,000 people in a square kilometer? You know, you got to be really, it's less than a square kilometer. It's more like 800 meters by 800 meters. So like, how do you do that beautifully? And so what we did was, we called it the Squircle plan. It's a square at the end, at the edge, but the center is a circle around the transit hub. And then we do a process called tweening. Again, it goes back to software. There's this command in Rhino, which is a McNeil-based software that architects use to design. And that command, tween, takes any line or two-dimensional vector and mediates them with however many lines in between. So if you go from a circle in the middle and a square around it, it'll slowly create circles that become squares with a kind of filleted corner. And that's called tweening. And so we used that command to mutate the center Garden City concept with the edge, the containment boundary of the grid, wherein we could create very, very efficient pedestrian roads and bike paths so that those lead very quickly to the transit hub. So you have like a 10-minute city.
I mean, it's incredible. I'm looking at a picture of it and it looks like a flower.
We designed it. It won the competition. We designed it. But in the end, of course, the financial crash of the pandemic, this is not going to be built the way we designed it. Neither was Ebenezer Howard's Garden City. And so I think architects are notorious for designing things that everybody sees as like, yeah, we should do this. And then it just gets cut up by the ravages of time, IRR, and entropy, because time means more entropy and ideas die.
I mean, it's unfortunate to hear, because the idea itself is incredible, because you're taking, the drawbacks of the Garden City and the transit-oriented development, doing away with them and combining really the best parts and really building a city for the people rather than for the car itself. And really bringing in nature. I mean, that was the first thing I noticed when I just had a look at it. I mean, the amount of nature in there and humans living in conjunction with nature and having nature and density in harmony is something that I think it's very hard to get done in today's world. And in a way, this is one of those examples that shows that it is possible. But I guess at the end of the day, you also did this project for clients, this radical transformation, borrowing from the past, borrowing from some amazing ideas of the Garden City and transit-oriented development, and really taking the best elements of both. How was the reception from the client side? Yes,
Orbit is a unique, I would say, well, not unique. It's actually similar to the model in Saudi Arabia. There's one client that owns all the land. So in Canada, it's a very unique situation, because I'm exaggerating. It's not one client. There's essentially like maybe 6 landowners in that. I'm not sure if that's true today still. It's been a few years since Orbit started. There could have been transfers that occurred or transactions, but it really is a consolidated group of owners, that agricultural land that the transit hub was planned for. So the power was truly concentrated within a very small group of people. And so there was that ability to drive forward visionary, I would say, more direct approaches, less decision by committee. But also at the same time, when you have a private landowner, their drive towards profits, especially in Canada, and risk management are such that seemingly radical ideas like Orbit, which it's not radical. The reality is you stand on the shoulders of other greats, and it really is just a re-envisioning, a retooling of the Garden City plan by Ebenezer Howard, mutated to the kind of colonial plan. And the density we were proposing and the radial qualities of the streets, I don't know if they're going to actually follow through on it. The real estate industry in Ontario and Canada generally, I'm not sure if we're in I would say once in a 100-year downturn. This downturn is already on paper worse or at par with the biggest downturn in Canadian real estate history, which was the early 1990s. So all bets are off. Orbit at the time, during a housing crisis, it's a great learning lesson for other places and other jurisdictions around the world, because Canada really it's an own goal situation. The federal government basically put all sorts of terrible regulations on foreign ownership in place. They put taxes on, there's land transfer taxes that have been added by the municipalities in certain instances. There's HST, sales tax on new homes that customers have to pay. Development charges have ballooned, so municipalities have essentially, there's a whole bunch of policies. Immigration policies were completely abandoned from their guiding principles, where merit and a point system governed. And then Canada just became like an open door for everything the government could have done to destroy the housing market, they did. And now they're paying the price. So will Orbit get built? Some version of it will get built. Is it going to be what I designed? Maybe in part or parcel for a part of it, but I doubt it. I think that this downturn is a big one, and it might be a casualty of it. But I don't think that's a bad thing. They never built Ebenezer Howard's Garden City in totality. There were small kind of parts or versions of it that were sort of half built.
Yeah.
But I think that architects are still trying. It's like,
yeah, it's true.
We're trying to climb this Everest of theoretical city. And the super studio version of that is the line in Neom. Why the Saudis didn't go for a radial, I mean, in that climate, the Garden City is what made the most sense. How all of those architects in that region have just got amnesia around it, I have no idea. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. It really doesn't make any sense to me. But I would call it amnesia, because all of these things they're doing make no sense to me. From an urban theory perspective, it makes no sense what they're doing. But they'll keep on doing it because it looks good. And it's more sci-fi, I think. It's sci-fi inspired. It's not, I really don't believe it's new urbanism inspired.
That's true. I mean, I think we've gained enough experience to be able to come up with ideas that suit the local context. So I think we just need to make sci-fi a reality now as well. I mean, I've certainly been trying to envision this style, drawing inspiration from arcology, biophilic urbanism. Actually delving into that now has been quite fascinating, because I see the parallels to, how the architects think about nature compared to how I've been taught it through the water management and through the research that I've been doing on nature-based solutions. So, yeah.
Yeah, arcologies. I got to go back into, you're only as interesting as your references are obscure.
Yeah. As you were talking, I was thinking of one of the famous memes that's been floating on the internet for years, which sort of shows concept sketch after meeting with client, after working drawings, and then after construction. You have this beautiful, geometrically complex with lots of green. And then the final construction, it's like 3 cubes because they've had to cut and cut over time.
We haven't, I'm not that cynical. Partisans has had the luxury of, in many cases, what we've built has been better than what we rendered.
Okay.
That's been the case for all the things we've built, almost all of them, really.
Yeah.
I'm proud of 95% of what we've built. The problem is I'm not the kind of person that likes to do that kind of thing where you design something, you get it approved, you sell something and you bait and switch, and then you do whatever your client tells you to do and redesign it as if another architect had worked on it from the start. And there's an ethical line I won't cross. Like if you won't, I think that that's really important. So I just haven't stayed on a project if the client wasn't willing to stand by what they baited a municipality or jurisdiction to approve. I don't think that's right. So,
and I definitely wasn't implying that, but I think, it reminded me of the meme because it's prevalent, not just in architecture, but when we think, I've been working in nature-based solutions for the longest time. And it's also, a challenge to get what you envision and what will actually deliver the functions it's intended to do to be built as is. I mean, in fact, just a contractor trying to build it properly is one of the biggest pitfalls for why cities don't adopt more nature-based solutions for, stormwater management.
I mean, stormwater management is a massive problem in Toronto.
Oh, yeah.
We have flooding. We have combined sewers here still, and we actually allow them to overflow into our lake.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
That's what's happening here.
Conventional management, controlling number and frequency and volume of overflows, which now hopefully is changing with a lot more of these decentralized systems. But yeah, I mean, going back to the original point, it's good to, I think, push all these innovations. And I think we are getting to the point where we understand a lot more about how you designed orbit, or in my case, how the nature works for the certain purpose. And I think it's getting that message across and showing that the cost benefit in the long term, I think is going to, that's what we should be aiming for rather than that short term win. And yes, it takes time until clients see the benefits come, but I guess getting them to trust that these benefits will definitely outweigh the costs. I think that's still
convincing clients on life cycle analysis, operation costs. Like the problem is that the way things are financed, it's all an IRR, short-term finance risk mentality. So everything is stacked against the architect or the consultant's best practices. Yeah. The contractors want to squeeze profits out of everything, so they don't want to do. Listen, some do, but they're fundamentally not aligned with you most of the time. The client and their financing is IRR based, and a lot of companies, I've worked with a lot of companies, and if you say to them, hey, if you spend an extra 10%, you'll save a lot of operational costs later. They're like, we don't care about operational costs. Operational costs are part of cash flow, and people have jobs and there's revenue, and we're not worried about that. And that's their answer. And it's like, wow. But I think that's because it's not set up, the financing. It does not care for that whatsoever. It's just not. I find it fascinating. On a very large performing arts project, I was told the operation cost doesn't matter.
Okay, wow. Yeah. Asset may pass hands over time as well. And, that just complicates things.
If you tell them you have to replace something in a really short period of time, that's different. If you tell them that the operational cost will be higher, like I guess utilities or other things like that, they're like, yeah, I'm not worried about it. No. They don't care. And it's funny because everybody's talking about sustainability. Everybody's talking about the amount. I want to talk about sustainability because this is something that you care about in your profession a lot.
Of course, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And what I see happening in architecture, architects holding the cross on saving the world with the same solutions and the same sustainability standards and mandates across vastly different, just climate realities and geographic realities, microclimate realities of so many different places around the world, and also power grid realities that are so different around the world. And it is what is happening in architecture is I find it laughable because all of these companies are not being honest about the sustainability mandates that they're adopting purely so that they can meet the greenwashed corporate mandates of the large clients they're quote unquote serving. But also, by the way, the downstream, all these measures, the architects don't profit from it. It's all the companies that have lobbied to be part of those standards that benefit. And the architects are the ones carrying the albatross. We are the ones saving the world, but everybody downstream is making the money. Yeah. And architects are struggling. So I find it unbelievably naive. The codes, the standards, the companies that lobby them, and then us trying to sell these solutions to our clients, but not participating as brokers. It is shocking. It's shocking. And the entire architecture profession, listen, we need to build buildings that last longer, perform better, and are better.
Just generally.
Sustainability to me takes so many different forms, but we are literally acting like tools for large corporations and completely unaware. Well, maybe we're not unaware, but the idea that we're couching this in our moral superiority, I find it really nauseating. It's shocking to me. But every time I talk about this, the sustainability guys are like, "You're a climate denier." I'm like, "I'm not a climate denier. I'm a climate diversity advocate. Everywhere has a different solution for sustainability. Like the sustainability solutions in Ontario are not the same as they are in Wisconsin across the border, where you're talking about completely different power grids, completely different resource allocations. It's just maybe that's not a good example, but I would say Alabama and Ontario. That's a better." Not that far away, but far away enough that it's like night and day what would be sustainable there versus what would add to sustainability here. And, from the Canadian perspective, it makes zero sense for us to be importing mass timber from Austria. And we are. Austria has the best managed forest industry in the world. Canada is 100 times the size of that country.
Yeah.
Maybe larger. Okay?
That's true. Yeah.
And we can't figure out how to export quality CLT mass timber products around the world. If we were smart and we wanted to save the world, Canada would export carbon sink to the entire world. Okay. And in Ontario, and Quebec, where you have nuclear and hydro and massive amounts of aluminum, steel, huge gravel pits that can facilitate concrete plants right next to where those towers need to get built and powered by nuclear or hydro, that has not got the same carbon profile as anywhere else in the world. And on top of that, we have a climate here where we have huge swings. The dew points are really bad. Like there's certain ways we should be building here to be sustainable and build. The other thing is this. I think sustainability is build your building to last 1,000 years.
Hey, I think that's a good definition.
Is your building 1,000-year worthy?
Yeah.
Will endless dew points inside your wonderful soft lumber facade system assembly last? Will it? Tell me.
I think that's a fair assumption. I think that we should be doing that or aiming for as long as possible.
But we're not, Peter. We're lying.
We're not.
We're lying. It's the same sustainability solution here as it is in Russia or whatever, Brazil. Like, it's ridiculous.
But I think it's also that efficiency mindset. Standards make things supposedly easier, but not necessarily.
But who's creating the standards?
Yeah.
Lobbyists paid by companies who make those materials, make those technologies. Architects have to wake up. You're part of a capitalist system. It's funny, architects also, we want to sort of be these social justice warriors and we're going to also save the world climate warriors. We are part of extremely powerful capitalist systems that influence the standards by which we are selling and operating. And if we don't have visibility to that, I mean, who's measuring the money going into these standards? Nobody.
Oof.
And this is something also, we don't study business at architecture school. It's like a little thing. It's like, follow the money.
Business was also a little thing in my engineering degree. So we had project management. There was a bit of costing.
I get emotional about it because I called the company Partisans. I believe in fighting for a cause, but this blind just assumption that everybody should be doing these same things across the world and not asking who's pushing the levers in places and why, and looking at power grids and being a larger part of the infrastructure decisions, being a larger part of the lobbying that takes place to govern our standards. Like, we really have to do some soul searching. That's my opinion. I mean, people talk about like the income crisis for architects in England and in Europe. Well, maybe what I'm talking about has something to do with it.
Yeah. I guess we'll let that sink in and be a call to action, I guess, for every architect to reflect personally about it too.
Yeah, I think so. I had a really big argument with a guy on a panel the other day at a very large architecture firm where he kind of represents sustainability. And I was like, you really haven't thought about this, huh?
No. Provocative, but true, I guess.
It depends on who your firm works for. Right?
Ultimately,
like municipalities and big corporations have these sustainability mandates. If you don't check their box, you can't work for them or you can't do the projects, right? So it's a bit of a conundrum, let's say.
Yeah. I mean, what makes me curious is, you got into architecture as a rebellious thing. You like the rebel theme is embedded in you. But what do you think after now having been in the practice for so long, what would your younger self find the most surprising? If you think back to what you weren't sure about.
So I feel the same way now as I did then. I learn from my mistakes, but I'm not jaded. Okay. And I still feel that I bring a kind of naivete, like why? Like, I have 2 little daughters now, and I know that like they're testing the boundaries all the time, and I still test the boundaries on every project.
That's fantastic.
So yes, I've had my teeth kicked in. I've lost projects, like all the things that most people don't want to talk about, but you have to talk about those things. And obviously the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. It's not that I do the same thing over or we do the same thing over and over again. We're much more sophisticated today than we used to be. But leaning into our values and leaning into this kind of cause, I'm excited about the next series of things that we're doing from an initiatives perspective. But I do think that all of our work is imbued with this why not? Can't we? Why? Like, Oh, you said no? Oh, it's this looks too expensive? Well, we'll find someone else to do it for the right price. It's just a question of, do you have the stamina?
Yeah.
There's a certain degree of activism that's required and willpower on every project, whether it be activism from just a project management perspective, but also getting it approved, the whole thing.
Yeah. And that persistence, I guess, is what really, brought Partisans onto the map, really making you a big player.
I'm not a big player. We're a small player. The big players, the issue of incumbency in architecture right now is a massive problem.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it's something the architecture profession has to discuss. It's fascinating to me to watch architects like Rainer de Graaf write Architects Against Architecture, and this idea of architecture being a broken profession, yet he's a principal at one of the most successful incumbent firms in the history of architecture. It is laughable. Oh, poor you. You're pointing out the problems that you've propagated? Come on. Like, I think, and funny thing is that OMA actually, one of its most endearing qualities, I think, is Rem Koolhaas's legacy of firm creation. The number of incredible firms that came from Rem Koolhaas's firm. But for them to cry foul about the crisis in architecture, I find interesting at best. Because these firms capture so much work. And it's these firms where people are talking about massive income inequalities between men and women, massive inequalities between management incomes and staff incomes. And yet these are the companies doing these massive projects.
Yeah.
So it begs the question, what are you doing all the way up there in your ivory tower? Why are you like, come off of it?
I like the way you use the word ivory tower because it seems like that's prevalent everywhere.
Oh, it is. And it's elitist. Architecture is an elitist, exclusive, very, very difficult internal culture within the profession. And this idea that big architecture firms are crying foul, it's like, well, you have 90% of the good work. A firm like mine has to beg, borrow, and steal. Well, not steal, but like, I'm being euphemistic.
Yeah.
We have to find the errors in the matrix to find work. Like literally, we have to find errors in the program to get work. We can't just rest on our laurels.
I love your visuals. So poetic.
Yeah. Thank you. But I think this is the other issue. There are massive, massive firms. And another example of this is I just wrote a humdinger on LinkedIn. There's the Temerty School of Medicine that has just announced their building at the University of Toronto. The University of Toronto has a sort of history of hiring great architecture firms, generally from elsewhere. So the big opportunities on campus are almost universally, most of the time, farmed out to international studios.
Oh.
Big Canadian incumbent studios have essentially become a means to a backdoor for massive, famous architects to do work here. And I am actually sometimes in awe that these revered studios that when I was in school trying to get a job at these studios, big Canadian studios that represented design, research, values, all these things, that they are now succumbing to this system whereby you have an RFP, the international studios see us as like low-hanging fruit, and they call up these studios. They go, listen, what are you going to do? We're going to find someone here to be the stamp. We're going to find someone in Canada. It may as well be you, right? And now almost all of these revered studios that I would have begged for a job for and worked at one of them also. I actually did an internship at one of these studios. And now they're doing this. And this building came out and it doesn't look like an MVRDV building.
No. I think I've seen some of their works, actually.
MVRDV buildings are very unusual buildings.
Yeah.
They're institutional buildings. They're civic buildings. These people redefined, again, another Rem Koolhaas disciple. These firms redefine architectures in the cities they work in. And the same thing happened with the Diller Scofidio project at U of T, where they demolished an extraordinary modernist planetarium building what an opportunity. They could have cut it in half or cut a wedge out of it. This huge concrete hemispherical planetarium building. Like so much opportunity for radical discourse between old and new. Just knocked it down.
Oh, wasted opportunity.
And what's coming is sort of not a portfolio building for Diller Scofidio, but has had lots of fees. And I don't know which Canadian architecture firm is quote unquote collaborating with them, but
okay, yeah.
I just think I was talking to someone else yesterday, and I said, this is really a moment where Canada as a country has a window. I'm not sure if you know about this, but Canada is really fighting the good fight when it comes to the US and what's right and what's fair and what's not fair, and being level-headed global citizens.
I've been observing some of these things across the news lately, and Canada's really standing its ground, which I think is great to see.
It's a David versus Goliath situation. It really is. But you come from a place of such rich culture, Peter.
Yeah.
Deep history. Like, we're different than that. And this is probably the last chance we have as a society, as a civilization, to invest in ourselves, to proclaim our identity as a society and our values. And architecture is a manifestation of your values. That's my thesis.
I like that.
Yeah, thank you. And if our values are sort of drab, boring, conventional buildings, I just don't agree with that. I think we have very progressive values in Canada. Yeah. I think we have, like, a lot of people in the United States would say we have radically progressive values, right? Progressive values that they have to fight. I don't know. But my point is, why is our architecture not as diverse as our culture is progressive and diverse?
Yeah. So weave me this, because I'm curious, as you're sort of showing this window of opportunity, but as you reflect on this, weave this into me. I mean, I'm seeing the rise of AI and so much on AI architecture going out into the wild. In fact, I mean, I follow on Instagram. I think he used to be at Zaha Hadid's studio, and now he has his own studio, Timfu. And the reason I know him even more now is because they're building one of the big chocolate parks in Switzerland. It was just announced. And yeah, they embrace AI a lot, generative AI a lot in their work to create some of their projects. How do you think this parallel track of technology that's completely disrupting everything presents an opportunity or a peril to architecture, in addition to the window we've got?
I believe it will have a larger impact on the big firms because they're going to either lay a lot of people off, or they're going to have a really hard time adopting the technology because they're slower and they're more incumbent.
Yeah.
So if they do adopt the technology, they're facing a situation where they're going to shed a lot of employees. On the smaller firm side, I believe there's an incredible opportunity because we're more nimble.
True.
And I'm excited about it. There's companies around the world that are marketing AI as a purely, there's a difference. Everybody, it's like saying I use a pencil.
Okay.
Truly,
I'm with you.
Find it kind of. I also find this very funny because AI is literally just a tool.
Yeah, I agree.
We use it, and Partisans is building extraordinary technology too, and we're using AI. I want to imbue that AI with much more craft, much more depth. I find the AI solutions, if you don't use that just as a concept generator and then remodel everything and really get into it, I find it extraordinarily superficial and surface deep. It just simply can't. It doesn't get you there. And you can tell the difference between an AI solution because it doesn't have the depth.
Yeah.
That being said, you can use it to generate concepts and sell those concepts and then go deep into it afterwards. But the reality is it's just a tool. It's like Autodesk. It's a very important moment. It's revolutionary. It's like the invention of the drafting table and speed rulers and all this stuff. It's like the invention of the internet. It's that disruptive. And I believe that we're at an inflection point. But in the end, it's like saying, look, I use a pencil. I use a ruler. It's like everybody's using this. Everybody is. Just some people are marketing it and able to create a following. And that following today is very valuable. So I think I find it funny. I think it's fine. It's fine. But you got to be careful when you're using AI because it's basically a palimpsest of other people's stuff, right?
True.
And in a way, their argument would be like, well, what do you think your brain is? Your brain is just a palimpsest of other people's stuff. Yes, but I have judgment. I have agency. And well, AI has agency. Well, like, okay, sure. I guess we fundamentally disagree on human agency.
Yeah. The future will tell us where this is going to be heading.
But to your point, young, small studios under 40 people, very nimble, massive opportunity to make inroads because we're faster.
Either way, I mean, lots of fascinating projects. I guess, one project especially that's close to your heart is actually a startup that you founded, which in a way works together with Partisans, but it's something that harks back to that curiosity and spirituality, but also just generally in the human. Hence we came full circle here. That project is called Cumulus, and in a way relates to spirituality as well, to a certain extent. It relates to a personal experience you had that led you to the idea, but it's also a challenge for what architecture and your knowledge in architecture can do in a world that is rapidly digitalizing. Going back to the roots of that, tell me about what happened and what led to you starting Cumulus.
Yes, so Cumulus is a digital memorialization platform. It's a digital cemetery. It's a place and space where you can go to celebrate and have faith that your memories and most prized digital possessions will live on forever. Why is an architect thinking about a digital memorialization site, a digital cemetery? Well, it makes a lot of sense because if you look back in history, the only things left over really from ancient history are tombs. And it's interesting that architects really, we used to be involved in tomb building. It was sort of like the Taj Mahal is a tomb. Pyramids are a tomb. A lot of the most celebrated pieces of architectural history are tombs. And essentially, this is a digital tomb. Cumulus is a digital tomb. And the story is not linear. It's also fascinating from the perspective of an architect. We don't get trained in entrepreneurship. We get trained in fashion styling, cults of personality. Architecture school is about building cults of personality. That's what it's fundamentally based on in the studio environment. Who can design the weirdest stuff and tell the best story and wear the right outfit for that story in that building.
Nice way of putting it.
I'm reductive. I think that architecture is about a lot more than that, but I don't think the education is set up for entrepreneurship. And I didn't go and study at Stanford. I have 3.5 architecture degrees. I dropped out of the AA at the end, as we talked about earlier, I think.
Yeah.
But in 2011, my father was diagnosed with cancer, and it was a slow cancer. And in 2019, it was when they said, you're probably going to have to start to do chemo. And chemo really changes the quality of your life. And anybody who goes on chemo, I don't know, we talked about this together because you have family as well, right?
Yeah, my dad was diagnosed with leukemia. It was a quick one, but he went through chemo and you could see the stress it put on us and on him especially. And I mean, in the end, I lost him a few months after the diagnosis. But yeah, I mean, it's a hard period.
That's just awful. So he asked me to design his tomb. He actually wanted a family tomb. My father is alive. He was a surgeon by training and a pathologist as well. And so death and morbidity, these were just table stakes discussions, literally dinner table discussions.
Oh, wow.
If you're a surgeon, you're just, I think he also didn't want us to be in a bubble. And we were genuinely curious, and there were heroic qualities. I saw him save people's lives in restaurants, choking on things.
Wow.
It's pretty cool to watch your dad save someone's life.
That'd be cool.
It's neat. Yeah. It's neat. And he wanted to design a tomb. He was very interested and still is in ancient Egyptology. Yeah. He's very interested in that culture. And I guess their way of mummification is also a sort of radical surgery. So for doctors, it's probably fascinating. It made sense. But he asked me to design a family tomb, and I basically found out that it was going to cost millions of dollars. That cemeteries charge millions of dollars for plots that are large enough for a tomb. That the buildings have to be made of cast concrete and stone and CNC'd stone, and it's very, very expensive to build a tomb. You have to be extraordinarily wealthy. So it became clear that he probably wasn't going to spend what he would rather pass on to us on a tomb. And then it was more like a gravestone. And it was all sort of, to be honest with you, a bit unsatisfying. When you come from a family that is an ideas family, a date of birth, a name, and a date of death, and maybe like a quick statement is not a good representation, potentially an interesting designed memorial stone or tombstone.
Yeah, I was going to say that, yeah. Because there's not so much you can put on it. It's a shape.
No.
That's your degree of freedom. And it's whatever is written, but it's usually the stock standard.
Yes. And I found that pretty unsatisfying. And then at the same time, my uncle was sending emails to all of us, his daughters, my brother, and myself. Here's another article about my accomplishments for the family archive. And I was like, what? I was saying to my cousins and my brother, like, what archive? Like, who's doing, like, and why is it falling on me? Design the tomb, keep the archive. it's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
And you want to do your family and your ancestors honor and respect, but it's a lot of pressure when you have a big, you're trying to build a big architecture firm, you're trying to get good work, that's a lot of work. And then the pandemic started and there was just death everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Death everywhere. And my dad was still going to his office and treating people. So it was sort of like, all right, like the guy's on chemo, also sorts of like, comorbidities issues. And I had a dinner with a friend who's an incredible entrepreneur. And he had this sort of innocuous, innocent question he asked me. He's like, Alex, what are you doing digitally? Bits versus bricks? Like, how are you wrestling with architecture in a purely digital future? And he just sort of asked me this question at a kind of nice couples dinner we did.
Okay.
like
I got you thinking.
I was like, what? I was like, I don't know. Good question. I'll get back to you. Good question. And my wife also, she's a tech investor. And between my uncle and my father and my wife and my friend, the entrepreneur, I just started looking at the things we were designing in the studio. We've always been adopters of radical technologies just because they're fun to see where they take you. I think that the joy of AI is that you get these surprises.
True.
And
that's the fun part.
Those surprises are rich ground. It's almost the same thing that Rhino first gave with form finding and computational design. And in that context, in the early 2000s and late 90s, where you really had this explosion of form because the technology to rationalize it, at least with a model in the window, was there. And I said, well, what are we doing? And I thought, well, what about, could we build a computational, generative, designed, parametric, algorithmically driven, immersive cloud of our memories? Like, could I build a tomb for my father and my family that felt like an architecture? Could you build, hypothetically, an online architecture inspired by all the best practices of architecture that would be resonant and poetic and immersive and have the qualities of a built place, but be online, be digital? And that was how Cumulus was born. And eventually, I started working on Cumulus before my father got COVID, but my father got COVID in the winter, like basically at like New Year's of 2022. So 2021, 2022. And I fundraised, built Cumulus, conceptualized Cumulus by his bedside in the hospital. I did a TED Talk in Boston to pitch the idea while my father was intubated. And I got back and he miraculously came out. He was in an ICU for 4 months. But basically, Cumulus is my grief child. I saw a need to build this memorial because our lives are completely digital now. Yeah. And a digital tomb is actually something that's within all of our reaches. A physical tomb is not, but a digital tomb and doing right by our ancestors and our next of kin, it's so within reach. And I believe that that can create more social cohesion in a very digital context. So I believe Cumulus is a way of saving the world in a funny sense, socially, because I don't think social media is, and it doesn't do honor to anybody. It's a free-for-all, unregulated mess. Yeah. That's what I think about it. And I would certainly never memorialize someone on Meta's platforms or X's platforms or Google's platforms or Apple's platforms. Those companies are there to essentially extract value from everything. And
from your attention.
I wanted to create a beautiful place. That's what Cumulus is.
And I think it makes a lot of sense. It's always accessible. I mean, after my father passed, he wanted to be scattered in the ocean in Thailand, which is a place he really loved. And in a way, I don't really have a set location to visit, but I can go to the very beach if I wanted to reflect.
Do you know where the beach is?
I mean, it's just near the place that we always go to.
Let's do this together. Hold on.
Okay.
Because this is fun.
Okay.
This is why I built this.
I'm very curious.
Okay, so here's Cumulus, a platform for age-old rituals coming together with people we love to share memories, grieve loved ones, and celebrate life while we're still here. So
it looks beautiful.
Let's do this. Go to cumulus.world and.
So this is us fast forward about 10, 15 minutes later, but you gave me a very nice demo of Cumulus. And I mean, just from my own perspective, it really is that digital world or digital cloud that you can walk through or fly through that really contains a lot of memories from your family. And you can upload images, you can upload internet links to articles or accomplishments, and I suppose you can scan newspapers and upload those too as images, and also locations, as I just described. And so, yeah, I found that quite incredible that it's like a mixed media, but really immersive experience where you, I guess, as a treasure trove of memories.
Thanks. And if I showed you my family cloud, you'd see there's hundreds of images and videos here.
Yeah.
I had videos of my parents. It's pretty cool. I don't know if you've taken a look at any of these, but I can show you.
Let's try not to share screen again. It might knock us out.
No, it's not going to. It's me fine. So this is my family cloud.
Oh, wow.
There's my dad after he recovered.
Yeah.
My grandparents, my great-grandparents. I've got photographs in here that my grandmother put together of people, my ancestors. Some of these are more than 150 years old. Some of these are so old, they're pre-photographic technology. They're almost like paintings.
So for the listeners who can't see it, I mean, and we'll probably have a short of this on the, as part of the show's release. But Alex is showing me his family's cloud, and you can really see it's a collage of just so many different things in a circular kind of virtual room where you can then click different elements and explore them. Also, a chance to get creative.
If you're a sci-fi fan, it's like the Minority Report of your mind.
Ah, yeah. Were you inspired by Minority Report?
Not at all. Not at all. I didn't even. Every time I've talked to people after this, they're like, "Oh, this is sort of like Black Mirror or Minority Report." Or if you're into sci-fi, it immediately brings these kinds of things up. But I didn't build it because I was interested in sci-fi. I built it because I felt like our most important things are trapped on our devices, and there are ways to like Apple gives you a way for someone to log into your, like you can choose a trustee of your phone in your iCloud.
Yeah.
But there's no sensitivity settings to any of that. Like it's basically full access. And, like I don't know, like a lot of people probably don't want to just give full access to everything. You need a place that's designed to receive all of this information that you want to pick to preserve versus just like a free-for-all.
And with all the pictures on our phones, like the number we take on a daily basis now, it's just going to be staying there and clogging up.
It's astronomical, the amount of content.
Oh, yeah. I mean, gone were the days where you had these photo books and you would have the film and you'd pick up the photos from the developer and you'd have the fresh album where you can put them in. And in fact, I'm saying this because my mum just shipped all our family photos across to Switzerland. So I'm looking forward to getting them and, digitizing and also.
So you got to digitize them. That costs some money. Then what do you do with it? Where are you going to put it?
Exactly. And you've just given me a very beautiful idea. So I'm really grateful for the introduction to Cumulus, but also for sharing your experience in how Cumulus came about, and also especially the hardships and the challenges that you took to heart and to make something big for the world and to share it with the world, and so that others can also partake in creating their own literal virtual walks down memory lane.
Yeah, and I can't imagine the grief you went through, right? Like you lose your dad at a young age, like how do you get through that? You want to do them respect, it's hard.
I mean, it was a challenging time because especially you go through this identity transformation, identity crisis aspect as well, but also just finding a photo of him, when we needed it, it was also quite a stressful moment. And if you have something like this, it makes it a lot easier. And, in times like this, you want to have the time to grieve. You want to have the time to feel and not be caught up in, administrative things and trying to deal with a lot of, I guess, consequences of events like these happening in your life. But I guess from my side, I reflect on it every now and then, especially along the creeks. I mean, that's why nature plays such an important role in my life as well, because it really helped me calm and, find meaning and see the bigger picture, especially in times when I was down. So, yeah.
Try this out. I'd be curious about your feedback.
Definitely.
Everybody who tries it, I'd love to know if it was helpful. For me, building this repository felt cathartic and healing. In the end, my father survived, but I was told he was going to die so many times, like 3 times.
And
when you hear doctors, trained professionals tell you that, like when, you've heard what it's like. You've been there, right? And when you hear that, you hear it once and it changes you, right?
Yeah.
But to hear it like,
because you have to face reality in the moment.
Yeah, it's very painful. And so I felt the release. I felt there was a need for it. If I had a need for it, my guess was I'm not unique. Like I don't think of myself as some unique unicorn. That my guess was a lot of people feel the same way. And they could use this thing, and so I built it. I was able to raise venture capital. A lot of architects also, the way that academia works is they essentially reward repetition. This word practice over and over and over and over and over again. There's a kind of monastic reverie in architecture for the person or the team that just repeats. And there's a predictability to that work or style. And that's a very academy-driven approach. If you look at fashion, for example, which ironically is the model by which the business is set up, these stylistic resonant approaches, fashion brands, fashion designers, they have to invent every quarter. And
that's true.
Although there may be through line through some of the work, they have to innovate and change a lot. Whereas that in a way, some architects have been rewarded for that kind of innovation and breadth of studio practice. But in general, the academy prefers this monastic approach to this repeat, practice. And the idea of an architect not just having an architecture firm, but a technology company or a desk services technology company at that, I haven't been embraced. I haven't, U of T hasn't called me up, or Waterloo, where I graduated from, to do a lecture on entrepreneurship and architecture and how you can apply architectural expertise to other avenues of practice and experimentation or business. I find it fascinating how architecture treats the expectation of practice.
Well, Waterloo, if you're listening, I think you should definitely hear what Alex has to say on that regard.
Well, I think most universities are starting to recognize that their utility is being threatened. We talked about AI earlier. Their utility is being threatened, and the value of a degree is being threatened significantly. In architecture, it's been problematized significantly. How can you justify spending $300,000 or $400,000 on an education in architecture to make $100,000 a year?
Yeah.
In a good situation, after struggling for years. Like you're starting off at like $60,000 a year, or $50,000 a year. That's absurd.
Yeah. And then you have also the job finding challenge where people say, oh, we need 3 years of experience. Yeah. And everyone wants 3 years of experience, but no one has the experience.
And with AI, it threatens all of these learning processes that are the low-hanging fruit administrative tasks or... Anyway, I don't want to get into it, but...
No, we could go on and on.
It's more about the journey of someone who studied architecture and still is in love with architecture and loves building all sorts of different architectures, heterogeneous architectures. I'm interested in all sorts of architectures. And our studio has research strands, and they're specific. We do repeat within them in terms of iteration, but there's more than one. There's a few, and that's okay. And Cumulus happens to be one of them. And it's also related to generative computational practices in built form. We just won a memorial competition, and it's inspired by Cumulus's generative qualities, parametric qualities.
Congrats.
And so this idea of the digital and the physical transcending and being interchangeable is very fascinating to me. And this is something that needs to be talked about more in architecture schools, but also in the profession itself.
Yeah. I think, melding the two, we're going to be seeing a future where that's going to happen. I mean, with mixed reality getting better day by day. And people talking about uploading our minds to the clouds eventually. Who knows what the future holds? But I think you're someone who really dares to dream and dares to rebel and do the things. And you don't take no for an answer and you don't ask for permission. It's like you have that innovation and you want to show what's possible. And I think that's incredibly inspiring. So,
thank you.
Blown away by just the depth, the complexity, and your ability to just really think that broadly. And it's a skill that I think will be incredibly important going into the future, especially in an AI-powered world.
I hope I can create some prosperity for the people who've worked so hard in our studio as well.
Yeah, definitely.
And I hope other architects think that way too at these big famous firms.
Yeah, but I guess listeners, if you're curious about it, do check out Cumulus. I think you'll find it very, very intuitive and also just fascinating to play around. And I think you'll find a lot of use for the memories that you have stored away in your phone that allows you to then engage with them more actively. But Alex, It's been fascinating going across your journey, across the things you've built, and really diving deep into, I guess, what our world is facing. And like I do with every guest, I'd love to ask you the key questions that I ask everyone on the show so that listeners can then get to know even more about you anecdotally and, about what makes you tick. And I guess innovation really sits as a keyword there amongst a lot of the things that you do, daring to dream, daring to rebel. So you've kind of defined through the experience already what that word sort of means. But I guess if you had to sum it up, how would you define the word innovation, and how has it shaped the way you approach challenges and opportunities in your work?
The hunger to survive and hunger is, I believe, what underpins innovation, because it's about feeding yourself and finding ways to create prosperity for yourself and the people in your orbit and those that depend on you, and vice versa. So I believe innovation is actually a symptom of hunger and desire and surviving. That's what I believe it comes from. And it's a fire in us all. That's what I think it is.
So simply put. I like it. It's so elegant, but so easy to grasp. But yeah, we have to all eat. I guess it is down to survival in the end, and we want to make the survival more efficient. Very cool. Was there a key... I mean, you've told us about many key moments in your journey, but any, key event, book, person, or seminar that completely changed the course of your career or your mindset?
Yes, there were a couple. I would say as a kid, learning that architecture, at least in the Canadian context, was rebellious, it kept me out of trouble.
Oh.
So the fact that I was where I was in Canada and was interested in architecture, however I became interested, it really changed my life because it was my outlet. It was this thing that I felt special from. So that's one. So discovering architecture in itself and this idea that it was rebellious and interesting was one. And then two, moving to Italy and working in Rome, it completely changed my frame of reference, the technology that I was using, and the way I saw the world, architecture, politics, and aesthetics. Mm-hmm. That is one of the most, if not the most sophisticated culture on the planet. There's others, obviously there's East and West. Maybe in the Western culture, that's the most sophisticated, I dare say. And also greatly misunderstood. The Romans are some of the hardest working, most productive people I've ever met in my life, at least in our field. So working at Fuchs's office and learning from him and his family and the people who worked there changed my life. So that was two. And then there's other ones, but meeting my wife, having kids has completely changed in the last 2.5, 3 years of my life, changed everything. And we're experiencing right now levels of prosperity and growth in the studio. We're working on our first international project, first design competition wins, awesome. First large-scale cultural project, and really all in the wake of getting married and taking the studio on a new journey as the sole operator of the studio and the founder, not having partners anymore. So 2023 and beyond, getting married, getting pregnant, and just having that blue sky ahead of me, that changed my life.
You feel like the world has opened up to you completely.
Yeah, it's opened up to me completely. And seeing these two lovely little ladies in my life starting to grow, and it's unfathomable. Everybody That's that beautiful. Gets to experience it says it's the same thing, but I'm just relishing this moment, and they're inspiring to me. And those are the three ones. I mean, there's all sorts of other ones along the way.
Fantastic. Of course, right? Yeah.
There's all sorts of, but like those stick out for me.
You always reflect back on those as really those turning point moments that opened up.
Yeah, it wasn't the first project. It wasn't. Yeah. There's so many fun things that happened along the way and important things that happen along the way. But when you really boil it down, those are them.
Beautiful. So with two companies, a family, your two beautiful daughters, time management, of course, becomes a very challenging thing. So what tips can you offer and strategies to our listeners for managing
I don't think I do a particularly good job of it. I do my best.
Yeah. I do my best. How do you maintain the balance?
I'm not naturally an organized person, I have to say.
Yeah.
I've become more organized in my own way, but I fundamentally say build a great team around you.
Yeah.
Empower them, put them in positions of great risk and responsibility, and just seek out the opportunities.
Yeah.
In terms of like management, a couple of years ago, a friend of mine offered me an opportunity that just couldn't say no to. He asked if I would co-invest into a building he owned, but at a rate that was really, really only a friend. I think in this world, people who are successful really have the ability to choose who to help. And my friend Stephen Scott in Toronto, who's an incredible entrepreneur, offered me this opportunity to invest in this building that he owned, reposition it, renovate it. And I think he knew from the beginning I was going to move the office in, but we designed it in a way where we thought we were going to make lots of money. It's a 5-story laneway building.
Oh, wow.
And it's a beautiful poured concrete building that I'm in it right now. But so eventually we moved the studio in here a year ago, and I live on top of the studio. So it's 5 floors. It's in the heart of downtown. It's in the heart of like one of the nicest areas in Toronto, across from the subway, across from amazing places to eat, to play, and living and being able to like flop out of bed into your studio helps. If you can just walk into your studio and not have to use transit or a car, it just changes everything. I gain a lot of sanity back, and I gain a lot of efficiency back, and I hope I don't have to change soon. But I really like this right now. It helps make up for my lack of time management, and I guess between Microsoft Outlook, plug for Microsoft, and this building that Stephen Scott and I collaborate on together, I have an advantage.
Nah.
I make up for
not sponsored.
my shortcomings.
Fantastic. And I guess it's, accept organized chaos and it just works somehow.
Well, no, like I said, it's team, it's place, and it all comes together and it works. It's team, place, and technology that's helping. It gets me through the day.
That's a much better summary of it. Team, place, technology.
Yeah. Team, place, technology.
Yeah. Listeners, try to optimize one of them if you can. And you already see big gains.
Equals lots of time.
Yep. So what is your favorite childhood memory?
No one asks me that, but I always think about this. And this comes to mind every time. Pulling my brother around my house in a thin cardboard, purple and white Pampers box, like it was a car on the carpet. I remember that vividly. And I think I was under the age of 7 for sure. I was probably 6 and he was probably 3, or I was 5 and he was 2. But it's one of my most vivid memories.
I mean, I just imagine that picture too, as you were describing it.
And the graphic of that box, and just like his blue eyes. And because you have this childhood amnesia, right? Before the age of 7 or 8.
Yeah.
And that I think about that a lot.
Oh, beautiful. So given all the experiences you've been through, I guess, what was one of the most challenging situations that you've ever faced in your career to date, and how did you overcome it?
So specific to my career?
Career or personal, up to you.
I would say from a career perspective, navigating the disillusion of the original partnership that we created the business with during the pandemic, and just coming through that and proving that we are, just an extraordinary team here. And going from that adversity of the pandemic breaking things down and seeing that it was a huge silver lining. And it was a good 10 years. We had a good run. And now it's been an amazing story since the dissolution of those relationships. And so I would say from a career perspective, that was the hardest thing. That there was a huge change, and change is hard. So I would say that from a career perspective, having faith in myself and the people closest to me in the business, Nathan Bishop, Ian Pika, Teddy Shropshire, Helena, there's a core group of people here now who are steering the business, the studio into places I could never have even dreamed of, really. If you told me that I'm working on what I'm working on now 10 years ago, I'd say, pinch me. Literally pinch me. Even 4 years ago, when my partners and I parted ways, if you told me you will be working on these 4 things in 2026, January, I would say, get lost. Go, I would be like, I don't believe, you're crazy. And it's amazing. I'm so grateful. And then I guess as a kid, you asked me like personally, I had some tough times as a kid growing up, just emotionally. So grappling with that later in life, and it wasn't from anything particularly traumatic. We're just nature and nurture. Some of the nature I had to deal with from just an emotional and it's taken work. It's taken work, and I'm still doing the work. But
I guess things take a while to surface.
Yeah, And again, it's not I'm so privileged. I'm so lucky. Like, there's nothing particularly bad that happened to me. It's just I had some quirks, and I had to work through them. Some challenges that I was born with, I guess.
But here you are now, and
but here we both are now.
Definitely,
we're survivors.
Hey, I gotta let you know when I get to Toronto next. I mean, overdue for a visit for the Tim Hortons, and of course the other coffee as well. But now we'll definitely have to catch up and compare some notes as time passes as well. But for all the young architects, young professionals starting out, what's the one advice you can offer them for their career?
Gosh, that's the hardest thing ever. What would I say to a young architect? You have to really want this. I don't mean like you're curious. You have to really feel the fire. It has to burn. And if it doesn't, ask yourself what makes or creates that feeling inside you. If it's not architecture, pick something else. Because to succeed in this field, you have to be extraordinarily resilient, and you have to be very passionate and energetic. And it's not a career I would want to get into for a passive career, personally. If you want that, then you have to be willing to sacrifice certain things that other careers would be easier for, like financial return. So if you want to get into architecture, I applaud you. I encourage you. But do you have that fire? And where do you see yourself? And ask those hard questions, because I didn't get asked those questions. I needed to learn the hard way. I only was told, don't do that, you're stupid. And so I that was like, naturally the response was, oh, that's rebellious, I'm going to do it. You said no. You said don't do that. And I'm saying do it, but only do it if you have the fire. If you don't, run towards where the fire is. Find it. I'm not saying you should find your passion in life. Find what you're good at. Find what you're good at, what you're interested in, and what you can work on. If it's architecture, great. Let's do this thing. I'm here for you. 100 million%.
I guess find your real why. Find that reason and that fire, as you said. Splendid advice.
Yeah.
So as we are slowly drawing to the end of what I think has been a fascinating marathon episode, what would you most like to be remembered for?
Oh, gosh. With Cumulus and the legacy piece, it's funny. I think about the universe and how, in a way, my fascination with science, especially astrophysics and quantum physics, these conversations and physical experiences and just living seem sometimes trivial. Like, what is a legacy?
Yeah.
So to get through the day and the years without letting that science pull me down into insignificance, I think about the impact and the trail, the wake that my life is leaving in interactions and people, and architecture is at best thousands of years kind of thing, right? So what does it mean in the end? I hope that I leave my daughters safe and hungry. I hope that they and their children are safe and hungry. When I say hungry, passionate and experience life to its fullest. And I hope that I leave a record that they can be proud of and that they can point to and be inspired by. And if others are too, in a positive way, great. That would be amazing. Am I a perfect person? Nobody is. We all have our peccadillos. But in the context of the just finiteness of us, I think about those things and how I can be good to the people around me, and how, like, I really have this instinct about my daughters. It's just an amazingly powerful force of attraction. Like, I just do well by them.
Beautiful. Alex, where can people find you if they want to get in touch?
All over the place. No, you can, for getting in touch, I'm on Instagram, Alexander Josephson on Instagram, Partisan Architecture on Instagram, Cumulus on Instagram, Cumulus World to be precise. So Cumulus World, like the cloud, Cumulus World. And then online, cumulus.world. And obviously LinkedIn for all of the above. And for the Cumulus companion app, if you are just mobile, you just go to the App Store and you can download it. But lots of articles about both Partisans and Cumulus available online if you search. And I'm pretty accessible. If you email Cumulus or Partisans, it'll get to me if you're eloquent.
And we'll make sure we put all that, as well as links to many of the topics we've discussed on today's episode, in the show notes so that listeners can go deeper on many of the topics. But Alex, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, reflecting, also being challenged in my own head as well by the things that you've explained and sort of illustrated so, shall I say, rebelliously, but also so eloquently over the course of this episode. So, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for your time. And just for the openness.
Thanks, Peter. I look forward to listening to it, and I'll see you in the flesh soon.
Yeah, definitely. We'll have to work on that plan. But like I do with every guest, I always give my guest the final word. So give the listeners one last message to take away from today, Alex.
Gratitude for your attention. That's what I want to end with.
Thank you very much. And that wraps up our epic, fascinating, and incredible episode with Alexander Josephson. For more information on what makes a future architect, urban regeneration, the garden city, and well-established philosophies, or just where to get good coffee and food in Toronto, Canada, check out the show notes for more information over at tgcpodcast.show. And as always, thank you listeners for tuning into this episode and for your feedback and support. If you are enjoying this show, I would be incredibly grateful if you could share this podcast with your family, friends, colleagues, and even fellow architects. Follow this podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, and other podcast channels to stay up to date with the latest releases, or be part of the conversation on Instagram at tgcpodcast_official or our LinkedIn group. If you're curious about me or my work in general, you can also check out my website or social media. Head to petermbach.com, my YouTube channel, Peter Marcus Bach, that's Marcus with a C, or Instagram at petermbach87. Give me some feedback or suggest a future guest so that I can keep improving this show. The podcast's intro and outro song is called Starsky by Alex Kieran. Stay tuned for our next episode and next guest to hear how they are tackling the grand challenges.